Hello and welcome to this video and welcome to June's book review. This month's been a bit of a weird one, if I'm honest. I started the month well, reading wise, and then towards the end of the month I've got just a lot slower with my reading pace, so I'm not getting through books quite as quickly as I was towards the beginning of the month, and yeah, it's a little frustrating, to be honest, because there's not a lot of reason why I shouldn't be reading at the same pace that I was, but there we go. So I do still have 5 books to talk to you about, because I have finished 5 books this month. I'm actually filming on the 30th, so I'm finally filming on the last day of a month as well, and there's no way that I'm going to finish my current read by the end of today, but I'll let you know that one as well at the end of the video. We're in a slightly different angle to the bookshelves, so if you've seen my book unhaul, yes, I still haven't actually got rid of the books, but in true professional style, I haven't charged my camera, so I needed to see, hopefully, fingers crossed, whether I can film this video while still being plugged in and my camera's sort of charging at the same time. So we'll see how that goes. Let's jump into June's book and make a start. So the first book I read in June was The Battle for Perfect by Helena Duggan. This is the 3rd book in that series, so I don't want to go into too much about what it is in case I spoil things, but we're following Violet and Boy and their town of Perfect, or town as it is now, as they have to save it once again. So this probably was my least favourite of the 3 books, and I think that's partly due to the fact that I've read them quite close together, because they do follow very similar patterns, although there are some very tense moments in the books, and this one is no different. It follows the same story arc and that kind of thing, so it does get a bit samey, and I did read the 2nd and then this one pretty much back to back, so it was a bit like, oh, I've kind of read this story already, I know sort of the premise, the plot points, even if I don't know the detail in between it. One thing about these books that I do like is that at the beginning of each of them you get the story so far, so should I have left it a long time I could have easily caught up, because it's right there for me to know what was happening. Like the other 2, this is full of adventure. As it is the end of the series, it does answer some of the questions, possibly not all of the questions, but it does answer some of them. As I said, it was enjoyable, it just wasn't my favourite, and to be honest, I don't think this should have been a series. I think we should have just left it at book 1. I really enjoyed book 1. I don't feel like having the 2nd and 3rd particularly added to that at all. I think we could have left it as a 1-book wonder. But, as I said, still enjoyable. Would still recommend the series to people. I think this one, I know it's weird saying it because they're the main characters, but this one follows Violet and Boy a bit too much for me. I much prefer the secondary characters, particularly sort of Anna, Jack and Iris. It's been a while since I've read this one because it was right at the beginning of the month that I finished it. And to be fair, some of the detail has already escaped my brain. There's been a little bit going on in June, so I'm not surprised that that's the case, but there isn't a lot more that I can share about this one. So that is The Battle for Perfect by Helena Duggan. I would say though, the covers of these books are great. I then went on to my Buzzword-a-thon pick. So the prompt this month was other, so reading a book with other in the title. Scouring through all of my shelves, all of my Kindle books, all of my TBR, I had 1 book that I could have read, and I really didn't want to read that book, because that was The Other Berlin Girl by Philippa Gregory, and when I had a look at it on my Kindle and realised it was going to take me probably the whole of June to read it, because A, I didn't want to, and B, it's very long, I decided to see if I could find something for 99p or for free on the Kindle store, and I did. So in the end I read The Other Woman by Sandie Jones. This is a domestic thriller. We're following our main character, whose name I can't remember, but for some reason I want to call her Millie. But we're following her as she starts a new relationship with a guy called Adam. I remember that because that's my brother's name. And everything's going really well in the relationship until she meets the mother-in-law, so Adam's mum. And Adam's mum is not very nice to her, and it sort of goes on from there. And the intrigue is, you know, why is she acting like this towards her? Why is she trying to keep them apart, etc, etc. And then there's a lot of events in that where you're like, what's going on? To be quite honest, I didn't actually like this book that much. I didn't get on with any of the characters. Although there was mild intrigue there, I didn't particularly care about why the mother-in-law was being mean and all of that kind of stuff. Adam himself had so many red flags and just things where I was like, why are you still with him? It was just irritating to read that. And mainly I just found it sort of overly long. There was a lot to it that we didn't need. The second half of the book was better, and the resolution was an interesting way of taking it. But that resolution couldn't make up for the hundreds of pages that we had before that, where it was a bit like, I really don't care. Oh look, we're at another event where the mother-in-law's made a snide comment. Oh look, we're at another event where this, that and the other has happened. So I thought it's a domestic thriller that wasn't that thrilling, in my opinion, but it may appeal to other people, and I'm glad I read that one instead of the other Bilingo, although it wasn't that entertaining for me. So that was The Other Woman by Sandie Jones. We then came on to The Couple by Helly Acton. So you'll see a theme in that a lot of the books I've read this month are gifts that were for Christmas or my birthday. If you don't know, I try to make sure that I've read every gift that I've been given over those events. They both feel quite close to each other, so over the course of the year I try and read them, because I don't like taking gifts into the next year. Don't know why, just my thing. So I read The Couple by Helly Acton. Helly Acton is the author of The Shelf, which is a book that I really, really enjoyed. And again, I enjoyed her writing style in this one, as we're following... Oh, this one's Millie, so maybe the other book wasn't Millie. I knew there was a Millie this month. But we're following Millie as she lives in a society where it's normal to be single rather than in a couple, so it's sort of flipping that social construct on its head, where, you know, you get asked, oh, when you're going to find a partner, instead it's going to be like, when you're going to split up. If you are in a couple, that's seen as the weird thing. But Millie is working closely with someone at work called Ben, and I mean, you can kind of guess where we go to from there. So I went into this obviously enjoying the previous work of this author, expecting it to be sort of more dystopian because it's a society close to ours, but obviously not ours because of that flip. And it is an interesting concept about the sort of shaming of people in couples. I'd say this one fell a little bit flat. I did enjoy it and I did enjoy where it was taken, but I feel like there could have been a lot more that was explored within it. And the romance that does come out between Millie and Ben, I think, could have been developed a little bit further. But I did still enjoy it. I still enjoyed the look at it, the sort of social commentary on it, that kind of stuff. The thing that sort of stood out to me most was that, yes, it was unusual for people to be in a couple, but there was no stigma, no prejudice or anything about how that couple actually looked, whether... and there was an app for like hookups, and it was encouraged for people to use them, but it didn't matter whether that person that they were hooking up with or that they were in a couple with was a man, a woman, non-binary, anything like that. So it was actually quite interesting for me, more so in the sort of aspect of a society that just didn't care about sexuality or anything like that. But then I feel it did fall down in some aspects of it. So our main character Millie came across very much as sort of an asexual person, although it was never said in the book. That's how I sort of took from it. But again, that sort of wasn't really explored very much. But then I guess there's only so much you can do within a 300 odd, what are we, like 380 page book on that kind of thing, when actually the thing that you want to do is write a romance. So I kind of understand why that wasn't looked at, but for me that was one of the more interesting aspects of this book. The other thing is, obviously we're flipping that construct on its head, that being in a couple is the abnormal thing and being single is the normal thing, but it was still written, and certainly the conclusion was still very much couple positive, which I'm not sure fit with everything else that was in this book. So I gave it 4 stars. I did enjoy it, and I do like Helly Acton's writing and would look for more things from her. There were just a few things in a few places that sort of just missed the mark that meant I couldn't give this one the 5 stars like I gave The Shelf. So that was The Couple by Helly Acton. So the next book is probably where my reading pace dropped a lot, and partly it was because I didn't particularly enjoy this book, which was Detransition Baby by Torrey Peters. Now, I inadvertently have read a few books that link to Pride Month without realising that I was doing it. So this follows our main character, Reese, who is a trans woman. She previously had a relationship with Amy, who is also a trans woman, but after a few events, Amy has decided to detransition and has become Ames, and subsequently has now got another woman whose name I can't remember. Katerina, and has now got Katerina pregnant. So it's a look at how that works, and how, if they came together as a 3, how they could parent and all of that kind of thing. Now this is a very popular book, and I've seen a few people on sort of the Booksternet and Booktube rave about this book and say how great it is, and I can see why people like it. But for me, I just felt a bit thick. This went on so many like descriptive analogies that then I didn't really feel like it came back to what the point it was trying to make, and it just confused me. So I was ending up reading pages of this analogy and then going, I don't get why this is relating to anything that we were talking about before, and now I don't really understand what's going on. So that is probably more of a me thing. I didn't gel with Torrey Peters' writing. So I didn't quite get from it what I was wanting, and that was obviously a good story, but also a bit more of an understanding around the trans community and that kind of stuff. And I did get that to some extent, but because I couldn't keep up with the tangents very well, I probably lost a lot of what was being said and what a lot of the things that Torrey Peters was trying to portray. Overall, I found this kind of disappointing, which is a shame. But that's mainly because it made me feel thick, and as I said, I do think this did slow down my reading pace a lot, and I haven't been able to pick it up. It's quite a wordy, verbose kind of book where I don't think it needed to be, and I also think if it wasn't and it was a bit more accessible, a lot more people could get a lot more out of it, which is a shame. But I'm glad I've read it, I'm glad I've tried it. But it just wasn't for me, and that was Detransition Baby by Torrey Peters. Now, a book I did enjoy, although I still read it slowly, and it's the last one I've actually finished this month, and that is The House in the Cerulean Sea by TJ Klune. This follows our main character Linus, who works for a strand of the government that is looking after the care of magical youth, and being magical in this society is deemed as a bad thing, and the children are sort of put in orphanages, although they're never really going to get adopted, but that's besides the point. There is a talk in this about the use of words and that kind of thing, which I did find quite interesting in my nerdy English language kind of brain. But he then gets sent to this top classified orphanage with some of the highest level magical youth, and he's there to essentially make recommendations whether it should stay open, whether it should shut and stuff. But while he's there, he develops a lot of relationships with the people that are there. So on the face of it, this book is sort of, there's not a lot to this book, but I did enjoy it. It was a sort of heartwarming, feel-good, fluffy fantasy. without having any of that high fantasy stuff that goes over my head. I do think this book suffered that it followed this one and that my headspace wasn't quite in the right place for reading and things. So I feel like if I came to this again in a different kind of mood, I could absolutely adore it, but I did give it 4 stars in the end. The main things I enjoyed about this, I enjoyed Linus as a character. I think his growth across the book is one that wasn't so... You can have character growth in a book where you go, wow, they came so far, and I don't get how they did it in that space of time. But his felt very natural and sort of realistic in that respect. And it's largely around him stepping outside his routine, which I can very much relate to in that kind of growth. I also liked the found family aspect of this. So obviously Linus is visiting this orphanage with it's got a bunch of kids, and the people running it that are not related, but they band together in this sort of haphazard misfit kind of family, and it's just a very sweet way of doing it. And I enjoyed that a lot. And to be fair, the magical youth, the kids in this book, were my favourite thing. I probably could have done with a little bit more of them. They were the bit that really kept me interested in it. And just seeing some of these things through their eyes, despite the fact that they're like 6 or like 10 or whatever, was fun. So on the whole, this is a sweet, feel-good kind of novel. There are some dark themes in it, just because of the nature of the children and the orphanage and that kind of thing. But I can understand why it's got the hype. I'm a little sad that I wasn't quite in the right place to fully appreciate it. But one day I'll reread this and perhaps it will reach that 5 star. But yeah, glad I've read it, enjoyed it a lot, and that was The House in the Cerulean Sea by TJ Klune. The last book that I was hoping to finish this month, but it's not going to happen because, as you can see, I'm just over halfway and it's the last day of the month. But that is The Man That Died Twice by Richard Osman. This is the 2nd book in the Thursday Murder Club series. I'm very glad to be back with Joyce, but obviously this will be now in the July wrap up. I probably could have got it finished by today if my reading pace was the same as it was at the beginning of the month, because the other 2 books plus this one wouldn't have taken me quite as long, but it is what it is. So I'm just slowly making my way through this one. I'm enjoying it, but as I said, I'll give you my full thoughts in the July wrap up. So there you go. I'm sure this is still a really long video, but I feel like I've talked about these books a bit more concisely than I would normally. I have had a good month reading wise in June. I'm hoping that, as I said, my pace picks up a bit again in July as things settle a bit more, but we'll see. If it doesn't, it doesn't. We'll just... Reading shouldn't be a thing that I put pressure on. It's for enjoyment. So if I'm reading slowly, I'm reading slowly. Yeah, so obviously July, we'll be reviewing this one. I don't remember what I have planned for next month, so it'll be a surprise for you as it is for me when I sit down and actually look at the shelf to see what I want to read. So there you go. If you've enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up. If you haven't already, please go ahead and subscribe, and I will see you in the next one. Bye!